What is it? Episode 20?
Episode 20. This is new types of content. We're doing React content. We are not addressing. We're not. This is the first time we've had a reaction within the same week of news
This
dropping.
ban list changed my life.
Yeah, we have special guests here. Alan Lube of This Round's on Me fame, and
Doesn't he have a
Miles
channel?
Slack, also of This Round's on Me fame.
That's
Welcome,
me.
guys.
Thank you, Ichin.
Hello,
I'm so
hello.
happy to be
Thanks for having
in
me.
my own house, but on this call with you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is a big difference from what we usually do. A year ago.
Yeah, and where's Kenny? He's
yeah.
busy.
Yeah,
He's
so
busy
this
as
time we're
hell.
not OK&Y. We are MAYO, Miles, Alan, Ichin, and Oliver. So we're going to give you a real creamy episode today. Talking about the announcement. Oh, you guys said keep it casual, so I'm trying to keep it casual,
Why
okay?
would you put it that way?
Okay.
Surely you could have thought of a better adjective.
No.
Nice and creamy it is.
Okay. So I'm just going to go kind of summarize it. Basically, there's a big PR announcement. I'm sure everybody who's watching this has heard. It's mostly a referendum on the state of the game right now, as well as a announcement of a course correction. So basically, James White, who basically writes an article once per year, says, when we launched with Fab, this is how our game kind of was developed with these 4 design principles. And since then, these design principles have changed or held true, or it's not necessarily design principles today. The biggest thing he calls out is a increase in what he considers to be negative variance that has led to an erosion of rewarding good decisions in favor of rewarding good luck. Oliver, can you scroll down, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm eating.
Oh my god, I can't believe Oliver's drinking, by the way.
Yeah.
So he will be talking 100% more than usual, so you'll hear 3 sentences from him.
Instead of 1.5.
Dude, Oliver's so happy with this ban list that he popped out the booze.
He popped up the booze. He almost, not quite, unretired.
Yeah.
And he's going to be less doomer. So yeah, big changes to. He says that the game right now is rewarding good luck a little bit too much, and that variance in the form of big spike turns, which he calls offensive overlap, has gotten a little bit too far. So he calls out a few examples of this, but mostly he says that they're going to be limiting the reach and ceiling of a lot of these spike turns by reducing the amount of card draw. Other certain cards are okay, but generally he's targeting the most egregious ones and then leaving the door open, maybe not directly, to ban more in the future. That's my interpretation. So the 4 design and development principles that he lists out for 2025. So scroll down, Oliver. Yeah. Are making sure that class talent and hero identity remains true. So making sure that every class and hero has their niche. Empowering agency, where you're designing more cards to allow them to meaningfully engage with the game, and reduce the amount of kind of non-games that people play. They want people to make good decisions that lead to victory, rather than making sure that they drew the right cards in the right order. They want to slow down the game a bit, where every card counts. They don't necessarily want the game to go to the second cycle all the time, but they do want the second cycle to matter in a meaningful amount of matchups. And then lastly, where they say path to victory, they want to make sure that offensive strategies are still rewarded, but these offensive strategies are more spread out through a couple of different turns, rather than relying on a big spike turn and chip damage to get the rest of the way, or basically like that. So they still do want OTK decks and combo decks to exist. So decks like Saber's Bolton and Viserai OTK are still okay. But I do want them to be either have a ceiling where you have to chip them down first, or to meaningfully work through it throughout the game. So imagine stuff like Dash, where you can kind of just luck sack into the spike turn. Not as great, but if you dedicate your deck entirely to executing a spike turn and are making your deck weaker fundamentally in other ways, that might be a little bit more okay. As long as you have to work for it, not just like luck sack into 3 tomes.
Yeah.
So they banned a bunch of cards, notably
Crazy.
Art of War, and then a bunch of cards. 4 books, or technically 5 books. Orion is a book. Cash In, Bonds of Ancestry. Most of these books are books that are virtual card advantage when they are turned on. Or sorry, literal card advantage when they're turned on. Some of the most questionable of which is like Tome of Firebrand, where it's just like 1 for 2 cards. If you turn it on, but nobody plays it because it's a shit card and nobody can turn it on frequently enough right now. And then he gives an explanation of each ban. I won't go over all of this, but generally they go through why it was banned, why certain things aren't banned. So, for example, in the Art of War section, they're like, why is Blood Spell okay, but Art of War isn't? It's basically the idea is that the ways that players have to cheat the costs of playing these cards has to be either relatively infrequent or have enough of a hoop to jump through to be currently fine. The way I read this, and maybe you guys might read it differently, is that if the requirements to execute some of these these extra card draw spells become much easier in the future, they are very open to banning these. Other than that, they have a few teases about at the end where they're like, oh, we do want to clamp down on some of these polarizing matchups and make sure that every class has meaningful tools to at least build their deck in a way that can not auto lose to a certain matchup, as well as some holistic changes to Blitz, where they seem like they're looking to shake up the format big time by maybe making some rules changes or something. They say, watch our YouTube channel, like, subscribe. I guess you can do that to us too, but you don't have to. And also, if you like these cards, you can play the LL, and they advertise LL a bit. Okay.
Except for Bonds of Ancestry, that one you can only play
Yeah, except for Bond. Yeah, fuck that card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
They
honestly,
call out Katsu as, yeah, Katsu's hurt too, but also honestly, Katsu with Bond sucks too. So, yeah.
but that's why we have new Gust Wave. I'm assuming that card was designed with some of this in mind, because everybody kind of went, "Why do we need another Gust Wave?" And then this might be why.
Yeah. So in one of the sections, specifically, I think it was the Orion section, they mentioned that the card was designed in early 2023, which is likely one of the first cards that was added to the set. Because I know that their handoff for production usually occurs 6 months before the set releases, which would have been late 2023.
Early 2023. So that's like what, Outsiders?
That would have
Yeah.
been
Dynasty.
Yeah.
either like
No,
Outsiders
Dynasty
or like,
was
Yeah,
end
between
of
those two, yeah.
2022. Yeah.
yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Outsiders was like March, right, or something like that.
So by that point, they had already planned Dusk Till Dawn. They had Outsiders coming out. They
Yeah.
had
So
Yeah.
Bright Lights
Most
coming
likely-
out.
Most likely that Orion, it's not that they didn't go through testing with Orion, but most likely it's you start off with the design file with Orion in the design file, and then you, over the course of the next 6 months or so, you just have playtests that change up the design file, and eventually you reach a finish point roughly 6 to 8 months before the set releases, where you finalize the cards and ship them out and get them printed.
all right, you
Yeah.
say that, but then they have this sentence: they didn't expect 12 Pedakasai to become what it is, and like this sentence.
Well, I think what this is referring to is like the design of 12 Petal Kasaya when they originally designed Orion was not the one that launched, like shipped.
Maybe.
So
Yeah.
it probably went through iterations, and then the final iteration made Orion too strong, but they
Yeah,
didn't
or-
change Orion.
Honestly, more likely is that they made the change to Kasaya. They're like, is this broken with Orion? They test it and they're like, this is probably okay, even though it's on the stronger side.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I
why they
mean,
made
like-
it like legendary, right? But
Yeah.
I think
So,
that
yeah,
points towards even more variance of like it's one per deck, and then if you hit it early, it's like wow, I'm popping off. Versus if you hit it late, it's like well,
Like the good old soul reaping.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. Soul reaping is an issue. Yeah. Any? I think that's it for like the general summary. You guys want to fire off some hot takes?
All right. But the alcohol is hitting. So
Let's go, Oliver.
before this BNR, I was very ready to quit. It's not because of the
Not
meta.
quit, just
No,
defoil,
I was,
slow
like,
down
really
a
close to
He
bit.
was ready to
He was-
quit.
he's ready to
The
quit.
first step to quitting is
He-
defoiling all your decks. So that's what I'm in the process of doing right now. Before this BNR, I was ready to quit because I did not like where the game direction was going. The meta is fine, in my opinion. The meta is fine. If Zen doesn't like high roll you, the games are still fun and interactive. If he does high roll you, then it's like a non-game.
So here's my question, Oliver. You keep on saying to me, this isn't the worst meta. This meta is fine. What is the
What
worst
is the
meta
worst
for you?
The worst meta? Lexi
Ah,
meta.
we should make a metagame tier list, boy.
Second to Cheerios Briar. What was the worst meta?
Lexi meta.
Lexi meta? Okay.
Yeah.
Conversely, I feel like Alexi was fine. I think it went
Are
on
you
too
talking
long.
about
Is my
Bullseye,
problem.
Bullseye Bracer Lexi or Post or both?
Bullseye Bracer Lexi. There's like Lexi with Codex. It's just you have so much go against so many on hits, and then you just have Codex for free. So you have like a 3-arrow turn without any effort. It's not even. It was not fun for me. Because
I mean, I think Zen does the same thing, except that turn when he does it, he just kills you, so the
Yeah.
game's over. So like, it's worse even actually to have Zen do that to you.
the
But
thing
but he
is-
doesn't make a ponder. He's not thinking about
Ah,
it.
Yeah.
okay.
The thing is like Codex is disruption as well, so it also feels bad for me to discard a card.
Yeah, but it feels bad to lose the game on that spot.
Yeah.
But at least you got to block with all of your
Yeah, I
cards.
get
My
a block
fault.
with all
You're
my
right, you're
cards
right.
first. That's
Yeah,
the
okay.
thing. It's the psychology
Yeah,
of
I
it.
think that's a personal thing. Then I mean,
Anyways.
obviously, but
Yeah. In addition to
Okay.
like the or going into the game design, there have been more and more power cards. So like starting with Codex, there was like Tome of Imperial Flame. There's they printed out Supercell, which is funny because like they have a bunch of Band-Aid cards as well. Supercell, there's the AB Evos, there's like the AB base, and then there's like Manifestation and Mirror Guide, there's Traverse the Universe and all that other stuff. So my complaints were they were putting too much power into Majestics. There was a time when commons were good, like Seas of Agony and like Autumn Touch and shit. But now, no, it's just like, do you draw the power
Whoa.
card?
Okay. I'm gonna stop
get
you
to
right
play
there.
power
Autumn
cards?
Touch was
Macho
never
Grande is
good. It
rare.
was just good enough.
Wait, is it a comment?
yeah, it was
Autumn
common.
Touch is common.
Yeah, but it wasn't good. It was just good
It was
enough.
just the Starvo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why.
It's
That's
just
true.
block 3.
Also,
like,
If there was
Seeds
any
Agony
other
was
first block
so
play that did something, like Autumn Touch would be out.
Yeah, Seas of Agony, Riftbind, and all the other shit. That was, those are still like quite strong.
I mean,
I
isn't
mean, they made. Go ahead, Alan.
isn't part of it just like they're moving power away from like the hero ability a bit and more towards cards? It just so happens to be the more expensive cards.
No
Because like if
idea.
you think about, you know, Star Wars hero ability, Chain's hero ability, Briar's original hero ability,
I mean,
Prism,
if you look at MST, all the power is in the hero abilities.
Yeah, that's
that
true.
is true.
Well,
Not for
It's like
new.
Zen Tutor on a stick.
Well, I mean,
Well,
if you look
you
at new,
do.
you have, you know, Persuasive, you have Bonds, you have
Sure.
yeah.
Codex, you got a lot of
Yeah.
goodies, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I
And
don't
you have
think those cards
Mask.
are necessarily exclusively strong in her. Like those are cards everybody in the class can use.
I will say
where-
that. Sorry, go ahead, Miles.
I was just gonna say where things like Seeds, like if you now it's unbanned and like Vincent doesn't play it. I mean, Vincent is another discussion, but they're building cards that are more agnostically powerful. So it's like they're always going to be there. They're always going to be a problem. They're always going to be a foundation of the deck. It seems like, and I think that's a big change from historically, where too many things had stapled on like specialization or restrictive class and hero component. So I don't know.
Yeah, the artificial limiting is also like another gripe that Kenny complains about all the time because there's this.
But the artificial limiting is what is the exact opposite of this problem, right?
Yeah,
If you're putting too many general staples, then obviously the power is going to be concentrated in Majestics, and you're not siloing that power to specific heroes.
yeah, I know. It's just like unclean design. If that makes sense, because like you're just, oh, I made this really strong card. I'm just gonna limit to one. It's just like a quick fix.
One of the criticisms that I have, specifically of assassin design, is that all the disruption is at Majestic and above because they don't want too much disruption in general. Because people hated ice because it was just every common and rare was like some sort of disruption, even if it was
Aether
minor.
Ice Vein, come on, it's so good.
Make a frostbite.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is separate discussions on like people disliking stuff like that versus like the health and metagame, because I think there's like a big distinction between like people at like high levels. Like I don't think too many people at high level were like, oh my god, Ether Ice Vein, I hate this. Oh my god, like I get Arctic Incarceration to get me out of here. It's mostly like at an armory, people are like, I hate playing against these ice heroes. But then as soon as they're gone, like other things take the place. Like there's always going to be something in the metagame people hate. And I think it's when like you need to look more aggregate of like who's complaining and to what extent, instead of just being like, oh, Frostbite, I hate this, versus like I have deep problems with the way this card game is being designed. Like it's two different types of complaints, I think.
Okay, tell me if I'm being out of pocket with this. I feel like, for example, like let's take Prism, right? For a new player, if you're playing like maybe an older aggro deck that wasn't as explosive as Zen, you might struggle with Prism, right? Because you can't just kill her on one turn when you draw Artifor. But then you learn the game and then you figure out how to play against it. Like for example, like Justin, when he won the calling on Azalea against Prism, that was like a pretty unfavored matchup at the time, and I feel like it probably still is. I haven't kept up too much on that matchup on Azalea Prism, but like there is a lot of lessons to be learned playing against like the decks that do like the weird things in Fab. And so I feel like when Zen became the meta, and even to a lesser extent KO, right? And like maybe new players come into the game and what they do is so fundamentally powerful that they don't even need to care as much about what their opponent is doing. So that when like the low variance thing, like if you're banning a lot of these power cards and you're making games lower variance again, like obviously a big complaint, not a big complaint, but a small complaint in the past was like, oh, it's hard for new players to get into the game because, what's it called? They can't win games. Like if you're picking up like Smash for the first time, and you play against someone who's played for 5 years, you're never going to beat them. But that's kind of just like part of the game, and sort of like a lot of the Fab players that were already playing had gone through that experience. And I don't want it to sound like, you have to pay your dues or something as a new player. I don't think that's like the case, but it's more like that's kind of all the game that we fell in love with. And to see it kind of like move away from that was pretty hard. And so I feel like I see a lot of people who are like complaining about quitting or this or that. But I don't know. It's just, I feel like if it goes back to lower variance, I kind of enjoy it because it's like you actually have to get good again, and your deck's not just going to carry you in some of your games, or you gem roulette through the entire tournament.
Remember when we used to play Katsu versus Bravo all the time? And you still couldn't beat my Katsu? Those were the good times.
Yeah. You love bringing that shit up, Oliver, huh?
Still haven't beat my Katsu.
I'm sorry, I couldn't beat your
Oliver
fatigue Katsu with 3
was
red
mid-range.
man.
It was
mid-range. Mid-range.
So
I think
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think to an extent, like it might not. I mean, like you're saying, Alan, it might not be for everybody to do that kind of like slug it out through stuff. I think there are some really rewarding games out there when you learn how to play against some of these harder heroes. That it's like a lot of interaction. Like, I mean, obviously, I learned a lot from playing against Oliver's Prism all the time when I was like relatively new to like more hardcore gaming for Fab, like trying to go to PQs and RTNs and stuff. And I don't think I was ever discouraged because it's usually can take something away from the game. I think that's the difference between some of these interactive heroes and like Zen, where it's like if I play against Icelander, Prism, even Oldham, like any of these crazy heroes where it's kind of long and there's like board states managed, like you come away from losses with like, oh, I can try this different next time. I can try this different next time. And when you play against these aggro decks, a lot of times it's like, well, they drew more damage than me. I couldn't stop them, and they just like ran me over. There's really no learning or takeaway or like kind of a sense of hopelessness or helplessness, which I think for some people they treat that as like, oh, cool, I'll just move on to the next one. And for other people, it's like, man, I came here to like interact and I didn't get that, so it's a bad time.
So I will say that of our crowd, I'd say that generally, I know Miles is mech guy, but we lean towards favoring or enjoying the more grindy matchups. Has there ever been an aggro mirror that you enjoyed?
Does Starvo count?
Or was that aggro?
I think Starvo counts.
Starvo wasn't aggro.
Yes,
Oh, I guess okay. I guess in the sense they kept 4 cards and then killed you in 4 turns sometimes. That's aggro. Okay.
Do you mean like mirror of like the same deck against the same deck, or just like aggro decks against each other?
Aggro decks against each other.
I think there's like some nuance if you're hitting different axes. Like when I play like boost dash against like KO, like there's actually like interesting gameplay there. That's why like I was fine with KO. It doesn't feel like there's as much when you're playing against like Zen. And like I think some different decks against each other. Like I think the same deck against each other almost never feels good in an aggro mirror match because you're just like two ships passing in the night, trying to hit your own game plan. But I think the issue is that sometimes like aggro decks that have weird tools that make it fun. I don't know if like Briar and Defy ever had anything interesting going on really, as much as like if you're running, I don't know, any other deck with some kind of interaction as a part of their aggro package.
I mean, you have like some tech you can run, like consuming volitions and stuff.
I guess, yeah, that's true.
Like, great, but like
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and nowadays that interaction is just warmongers, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know what the answer. Well, okay. Well, to answer the first question, enjoying aggro mirrors. Whenever I sleeve up an aggro deck to an event, I sign up for the experience of not really caring and just playing my cards and seeing what happens. Like if I had won an RTN this season, then I go to the next one and I, play Hanabi Dash or something, right? And I'm just there for a good time, and I don't want to spend too much time thinking and trying to win. But I think that what I want from aggro is to see class fantasy is definitely part of it, and that is a large part of design, of course. Like you want to feel like you're doing what the hero is doing, like Aurora with her lightning shenanigans or whatever, right? Or ninjas going super wide. But I think from like a meta competitive perspective, I want aggro decks to have some differentiating factors that have meta relevance. Like for example, the last thing I can think of was when Fi was like an okay aggro deck. I don't remember if it was post or pre-belittle, but people would talk about how it's really hard to fatigue Fi because he has Shuko and or it's really hard to fatigue Fi on Oldhim because he has Shuko and he has Phoenix Flames, and you can't even Oldhim, unless you built heal Oldhim, couldn't block out like the entirety of Fi's deck. So that's an example, right? Like being more resilient to fatigue. Whereas on the opposite hand, Dash can maybe be a little bit more explosive, but she's way more vulnerable to fatigue, right? Yeah. So that's one axis. Another axis is Rune Blades with split damage. Some heroes have an easier time mitigating that efficiently compared to others. The weird thing about arcane damage is that if you're talking about fatigue, arcane is always like horrible into fatigue because you're not actually getting cards out of their deck when you're hitting them with rune chant damage and stuff. But that's just like another axis, right? Like split damage can make things tougher for some decks, but maybe not other decks. And I don't really know what the answer to this is. Like, obviously going wide is very powerful, but at the same time, I can't think of a world where going wide is not always just like the best thing you can do. Like, maybe Dense Blue Mist is a card, right? So that's a consideration, but it didn't really have meta prevalence for the most part. Like Oliver runs it, I know, but I would say the majority of players don't really run it. But I feel like if you're doing damage as an aggro deck, it's always better to just go 20 times than just go 20 in one big attack, because then more decks have tools like Sink Below, like Unmovable, all these efficient cards that can block tall attacks, but blocking wide attacks generally is very difficult unless you were Oldhim, right?
I was gonna say the funny thing is all the decks that dealt well with wide have LL'd, which is like all these different ice decks that could actually like slow you down or stop you mid-turn or like reduce your output.
Exactly. Like if ice comes back and maybe like it comes back in a more fair form and it only taxes like one resource on average a turn, right? Like maybe that's really or like Channel Lake Frigid, like maybe that's obviously very difficult for ninjas or Zen to deal with. But what if there's
the way they're currently built, right? Like you could have to make deck considerations, like it changes the whole
the way they're currently
texture.
built. But for example, like when is an aggro deck going to come out that actually only plays one card a turn? Like Azalea technically is one attack, but it's throughout 5 cards in her hand. And I'm not saying I want some Unga Bunga Guardian that throws 20 every turn by pitching 4 cards and pulverizing. But I'm saying like, if they build another flavor of aggro that has like a different unique characteristic that has meta relevance, that's what I would like to see.
Like Azalea?
Kinda.
Azalea's pretty aggro right now.
She is, but it's like she definitely sits in this
wide doesn't mean she's an aggro deck.
It's not that she doesn't go wide. She definitely is an aggro deck, and she does have a lot of like competitive meta uniqueness in terms of like she can splash in just a little bit of disruption. She has tall attacks. She has dominate. She doesn't have good armor. Like even negative things count, right? As like meta relevance. So I do think Azalea in that sense is like pretty well designed. Like I enjoy Azalea as a deck, and playing against it. But that's generally also because I play decks that are generally fine into Azalea.
Yeah.
So it could be
Azalea-
my little guardian bias brain talking here, but yeah.
Azalea becoming aggro is the worst thing that happened to her. I used to like Azalea when you like ran take cover and like sync blow and shit.
I mean, you
Wait,
still
Play
do it.
Riptide.
It's just not good.
I know. That's yeah. I don't know.
Well,
I
that
like
I mean, if you're
that.
gonna do that nowadays, you play Riptide, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
And that's the niche that he occupies, right? So it's a little like
Yeah.
like as we get more heroes and as the CC format expands, alternate build niches become supplanted by like hero niches, and that's a bit of a shame, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah. I think I mean, obviously since it's like day of this announcement, we can't really tell how the meta is gonna shake out. I mean, a lot of people are going, "Oh my god, it's gonna be KO," which
Right.
who knows, right? But I think at least we'll see something interesting. I mean, obviously this means Rosetta heroes aren't just like dead on arrival, hopefully,
Yeah.
with this change. So I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing some kind of different texture. Like hopefully a couple different real meta players. Like I mean, I know the era of Starvo was not loved, but there was still somewhat of a like diversity of like there's these top 3 or top 4 decks with like Chain Prism and
Those
Viscerai
games were
until
those
Skeleton got banned.
bangers.
So
Right, yeah. When it was everybody except Starvo, you were like, wow, we're a great game. And I feel like
so
it doesn't feel that way now.
actually, I want to follow up on that thought. But do you guys have any other thoughts about the ban list and or aggro decks place in the meta in general?
One last thing is that aggro, I think, already has different flavors. There just aren't decks that cover the other axes where it matters. Like ice doesn't exist, fatigue doesn't really exist right now. I mean, Riptide's a thing, but it's not as prevalent. So I feel like I don't know. Like the counterpoint to aggro needs more flavors is that there also needs to be more like archetype flavors, trying to do a game plan that's not just do my thing and kill you.
Yeah, I mean that's what Azuri and New kind of placed, right? Even though Azuri's kind of bad.
Yes.
What PT winner? What do you mean?
I mean, this is like saying Fi's good because he won.
Okay,
World.
no, fair. You got me there. All right, you got me
Hating
there.
on Tao Tao that much, huh?
Whoa, Tao Tao says he's bad.
It is
This one
true.
does
He is a
well.
noted Azuri hater.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess.
Okay.
It's like back then when Oliver would say Prism sucks.
Prism
Yeah.
does suck.
Except
You
Tao
just
Tao
don't know how to
wasn't
play
lying.
against her. You're just making the wrong decisions. Yeah, you have to make good decisions to win. That's what James White wants. You're not making the right
Yeah.
decisions.
Oliver's trying to
Ironically, correct. Like,
appeal to authority. Excuse me.
yeah,
This is
Okay,
alcohol talking, surely.
surely.
It's fine. It's fine. Okay, so I wanted to actually touch on another topic, which was, and you guys mentioned it before, where a lot of pro players really look back on the Starvo meta fondly. But a lot of people at the armory and casual and slash like grinder, but not really local grinder level, they really didn't like that meta. And I've actually noticed this with the reaction to this ban list, where most of the enfranchised pro level players are pretty positive on this change. I did a quick poll in that super secret Frank Discord, and I said, "How do you feel about this change? And are you generally positive or neutral or negative about the game in general after this change?" And the majority of players are, "I feel great about this change. I am positive on this about the outlook of the game." And there's a small handful of players that are either neutral or negative on this change, but still positive about the game in general. Meanwhile, I'm looking at a lot of the YouTube comments and a lot of like low level, not like
Low level,
personality
that's
players.
crazy.
Like
Damn.
ground level responses to a lot of these changes.
Is that better?
And the reaction's a lot more mixed. I've actually noticed that most of the Japanese reaction is pretty negative on this change. Do you think
I think
that-
Japanese is a unique situation because they're a newer market. Like if a
Yeah.
lot of people are introduced to the game through MST and they pick up Zen, they pick up, mainly Zen, right? And then they're like, "Oh, your deck is like crazy neutered now." That's not a great look, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's probably something that LSS did consider, but I do imagine they went with this change anyways in hopes of like, at least in my mind, is they're thinking about like the player base they have cultivated so far,
Yeah. I think so. I think this is very like competitive focus changed.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, I think the weird thing about these bans, right? What they're targeting is like, hey, you get kind of like out of the blue killed with like a power card. Like for a lot of these, or like, you're getting insane card advantage for like little cost because of like whatever hero you're playing. Like heroes will consistently abuse these effects. So like, and it's been that way over time. So we're getting rid of it as a class of cards. And there's a lot of players who see that their decks are running these cards and they're like, oh, there's this playstyle, there's this thing I like that I can't do anymore. I know particularly like Tome of Divinity with like Vestige, it feels pretty bad. Or Kano decks losing like Tome, especially if you're just like new to Kano, you finally figured out how to do stacking, blah blah blah. Like that feels really bad. But I think it's the the flip side is obviously you need to at the same time look at all the games where you played against somebody else, and then they did this to you, and your entire game was invalidated.
Mhm.
And I guess if you've been doing that to other people, it feels sad to lose it. But I think it's maybe something for people whose decks are immediately affected, who are relatively new. They just need to, hopefully over time, they can see that this was the correct choice. Because I don't know if any of the people that I've seen reactions from are like, this is a bad change for the game. They're mostly like, I don't like that this card was taken from me.
Mhm.
Which
Or
is
it's
a
like,
valid.
why was this card taken, but not this card?
Yeah, which is explained exactly like right here in the article. And I think they're also not saying that this is like definitive. Like they're fair to come back to some of those cards that they didn't hit. So I think another thing for like us longer term players is that they're LSS has done changes like this before, where it's like hey, here's a big ban and restricted. We're changing like our philosophy on the game. Like I think the first one was like when they banned Drone of Brutality, where they're like, we don't want this to be the way our game plays, so we're getting rid of this card, and we don't want to make cards that work like this in the future.
Yeah.
I mean, similarly, like when Tails came out, and it was like we're pre-banning Duskblade, we're doing all these other things. Like, we've seen kind of classes of this ban type before. So it wasn't like we're
I
super
think this
taking.
ban list is like the most nuclear one they've done so
Yes,
far.
but I mean,
By
there's
far.
like,
But yeah,
there's like
but
steps to this, right? It's not like
yeah.
So I think we're all like, okay, this seems reasonable. Where some other people, if you haven't been around for any bands except like bonds and like smaller ones in the time since like the LL of like Lexi, like there's been almost nothing. And then you see this, it's like, oh my god, I thought this game was like super secure. I thought I was locked in, and it's like very jarring. Um, so I think there's like a lot of factors going into like panic by newer players, or just concern, not even panic, but like just mixed feelings. And I mean, it's been 6 hours or something, so maybe it's just like we all need more time to stew.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're doing this podcast, right? Knee-jerk reactions.
Exactly.
This is as knee-jerk as we're gonna get.
Yes.
I think maybe on another level is that these cards are generally the fun cards,
That's
Drawing
true.
for is fun.
I mean, it's
And,
very
like,
fun for the person
even back
playing.
when we played Fire for the first time, like with triple Tome of Firebrand, like that was crazy. That was fun.
Amount of times
Yeah.
Oliver is just like, oh, double tome. I'm popping off. This is the best ever.
Good old me on
Double
Guardian,
tome.
Auburn
Put down
Prism.
the mercy
Triple Tome,
retribution and the
Genesis
Firewall.
Merciful, Arclight Pass. And I'm like, okay, pass your turn. Got it.
Yeah, honestly, Tome of Divinity is my favorite card, and I'm not sad to see it go because it was honestly like the hoops to get it online, non-existent.
Yep.
Now you can collect them for dirt cheap.
Yeah.
I always
pennies.
joked that Oliver's tomes were magnetized to each other because he'd always like play tome, draw another tome, play tome, draw another tome, and I was like, I watch you shuffle, I cut, but somehow they're always right next to each other.
To be fair, our Oliver will Arsenal one and wait till he draws the
Yeah,
other.
the trick is to play it from Arsenal, and you play so fast that the thing is from hand.
and they're like, wow, I just got high rolled. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I mean, I think that's the weird thing, right? Like even if like I know Caleb Majin Bay put out his video and he was like, "Wow, I just got like destroyed." But honestly, I love this change. So it's more about looking outside of whatever you're doing currently and being like, in the future, I'll play other decks. Other decks are going to play against me, and this will make everybody more happy long term. That's what this signals to me, I guess.
Yeah. I have one more question about kind of related to this, but anybody want to add their thoughts before I move on?
Thank God that banned Art of War. Holy shit! I've been wanting it for like years.
Dude, Tao's rejoicing, I bet.
Yeah, Tata's so happy.
Yeah.
Dude, he literally
happy
messaged
he
me. He's
didn't
just
get
like, "Hey,
legendary.
let's do a video." I was like, "Oh, you're coming to me," and he's like, "Let me rant real quick." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Oh, it was about not banning Traverse, right?
About not banning Art of War. It was right after Amsterdam. Yeah, that was
Oh, yeah.
funny.
Oh, okay.
Tao breakdown section of the video.
But
Yeah.
he was just not happy with MST as a whole.
That's fair. That's fair. I think competitively it was a lot less well received than it was casually.
I don't know about that because I feel like a lot of casual people like hate playing against new
That's true.
because it kind of rips cards from you, and if
That's
you
another one
like
of those
don't see anything coming, it's
get
like, oh, it
good
feels bad.
boys. I'm kidding.
I guess the proper term is the public sentiment of MST dropped off dramatically once people had to play constructed.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So following up from that, which is the dichotomy between uh newer players and older players. Do you ever worry that along with this like philosophy change, um, wanting to get games back to be more skillful and less variance based has been a big debate amongst fighting game communities for a long time. Where prior to like SF6, honestly SF5, one of the biggest hurdles for fighting games was attracting new players, and one of the biggest culprits of that was the fact that it was low variance and that tools in game weren't enough to help bring players up to speed and enjoying the game as fast as they'd like. Um, do you worry about a casual drop off at all, or are you like this is totally fine for the game? Players will play what they like, and it's okay if it stays relatively small.
I guess my hope is that this will kind of be like, those fitness guys where they go on a bulk and then they go on a cut and then they go on a bulk and then they go on a cut. But over time, they slowly gain more muscle and get more fit, where it's like you increase the variance a little bit, get some new players in, lower it a bit, some leave, but more stay than left, and then, you just keep going, riding that train
You
maybe.
want to be on a roller coaster with Oliver quitting every other year?
Well, the highs and lows need to be more,
Mhm.
less magnitude,
Yeah.
But I do agree because like back in the Lexi meta, that was the main complaint of people, right? Or like
It was
that
like Icelander Ultimate meta. That was like where you heard it the loudest.
okay, yeah, where people were like, oh, the game is too low variance. The same good players winning worlds and nationals. I'm just kidding, but I mean, I feel like it's hard because that's like one of the big draws that I feel like people talk about when it comes to like introducing people to Flesh and Blood, or at least for me, that was kind of one of the things that I liked most about it. Where it was like, I remember when I first started playing the game, I was watching like Matt Rogers win events over and over, and I was like, wow, a game where like the same player is or the maybe best player at the time can win events over and over in a card game, which inherently has a lot of variance, like was a big draw for me at least. So I feel like it's tough because if they increase variance like they did with Zen and they attract a larger player base, and some of that player base leaves because they want to go back to what they feel like Flesh and Blood is, then I feel like that's just kind of what they have to do. Otherwise, it's just if you just want to do the thing that gets the most players, then Flesh and Blood no longer really becomes Flesh and Blood, right?
Yeah. Any other thoughts, Miles? Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, I think, like I was saying, I think one of the big draws, and I mean, the original tenets that they listed here was about the game being quite low variance, and that's like one of the things that set it apart from other games. And especially the part where it says every card counts, where I was like, this is something where it's a lot of cards count much more than others. It feels like Oliver saying, where it's a lot of the power concentrated in like your spiky, majestic cards.
Mhm.
And I think the thing that happens with like newer players, where you get in, and you have a chance to kind of upset better players or more enfranchised players. Like over time, the longer you stay in the game, you will become the better, newer, longer standing, more enfranchised player, and then you will just proceed to like get like you always get upset by the new generation in that way. And I feel like if you keep playing over and over and over again, you want to see a growth in your skill. You want to see like oh, I'm starting to get closer with more people above me, and I'm starting to make some kind of gap against newer people. I don't think it would be very rewarding if you played Fab for like years and you just stayed at like a 40 or 50% win rate and like essentially like nothing you do made you better or worse. It was just kind of like the decks playing themselves. Um, so I think this change, like centering back to what Fab was built as, because I mean it's like a rush down duel game where you're two people fighting each other in a very succinct way, and I think making it be this weird, not top deck off, but like explosive game that just kind of ends out of nowhere, where you're just racing to kill the other person first instead of like this kind of cinematic duel is definitely a move from the way it was incepted, and I guess the return to form I think should be a good thing. And I think if there are like really new players that have an issue with this because the only thing they've seen is kind of these crazy explosive big decks, that hopefully they can see the benefit over time. I don't think all these new players are necessarily just jamming Zen, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't think
they're heroes.
yeah, and I think losing a couple cards, if everybody's losing a couple cards, the ceiling of power just drops, and you're still playing the same kind of competitive games, just with like less random outcomes, which hopefully is a good thing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So for my perspective, sorry, I don't really remember the question, but I think this has to do with like casual or.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to be difficult for casual players to pick this up again?
Okay.
If the game moves towards lower variants?
Right.
Kind of
So I think that's what the armory decks are for. They are injecting like really strong cards with the armory decks, as well as making a stepping stone for newer players to join that way. And the decks are fine. They are strong within themselves, and they can compete, as Ichin has found out, because he's the one that plays the armory decks at the armories. And he's not going like a negative win rate. He's like going even. So that's.
I went negative win rate on Bolton.
Oh well, that's because you played 2 games,
Unlucky.
right?
No, I played 7 games with Bolton. Oh, sorry, 7 games with Bolton. One of them was to a newer player.
Oh well, you also played against Kano when the deck has no AV, so you can't really do anything against that.
Yeah. But like also I played Zen, 2 Zens, so
Yeah.
that's also
Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah. So I come from Boomer Fab, where fucking blocking was like the greatest thing ever, and I kind of wanted to go back to that, and I don't know. I really enjoy
But I
that.
can get 12 value on my hand. That's crazy.
Yeah, getting 12 value out of your hand when the damage ceiling was like 17 instead of like 50. Those were the times, man. But where was I going with this? Like going on, like looking back at these design principles, you can really feel it back in the day with like the crew meta. You definitely went to second cycle a lot. You went to even third cycle against some of the other decks. I mean, I was playing mid range Katsu, so I usually went to second and third cycle, and like just try and Kodachi lock people. So that was fun for me. Back in the day was also a lot of like back and forth. There was a lot of low tempo swings, even though the damage ceiling was lower. So like blocking out with your hand was fine to do.
Yeah.
And you can always like come back from that. So I would love to see that happen again.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it still happens in certain matchups.
Yeah, certain matchups it does, but like current meta, just like if you're blocking your whole hand against an aggro deck, you're not coming back from that most likely. Yeah, going into like what their new principles are, I am pretty hesitant on saying that the whole game is fixed just because like they released this article. I will believe I'll see it to believe it. It's probably gonna take a few sets for them to realize, or for this to come to light. So I'm not really holding my breath. So, but they did say like they have 3 sets finished that will be released in 2025, and if they are following these design principles with those 3 sets, that will be positive for me. So
yeah,
let's see. Well, the only thing to do is wait and see.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so let's kind of wrap this up, or get to the end of wrapping this up. This is the beginning of a change, and it sounds like that they have a lot of announcements, both commercially and maybe changes in direction philosophically or like other stuff announced for October. If you could have any change in the game, be it on any aspect, what would you want? That isn't already listed here.
Less filler heroes.
Yeah.
Like just leave Betsy and Olympia as young.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I was saying that before too. Not
Yeah,
this episode.
I feel like with this pace, eventually the cast of heroes in Flesh and Blood's gonna become gigantic, and the meta is really only like 10 of those. And sure, you can wait and play your favorite. And it's hard because I think there is a lot of enjoyment to playing a bad deck and waiting for your time, or maybe your time never comes, and that's fine too. You just enjoy playing a bad deck, and when you win against a good deck, you're like, haha, I beat you with a bad deck. There's a lot of enjoyment in that, but I don't know. I think that sometimes it's just too much. And then like if every set expansion slot cards come out to fix every single pet deck, then it just gets cumbersome. Like just leave Betsy as young, and then like make her show up in a new set with a talent or something crazy, right? And that could be like interesting. Or like Arachne, finally has another form, Arachne Star of the Show or something like that, right? But yeah, I think they could slow it down, especially if they continue doing like 4 and 6s, or if they or 6 heroes. I mean, I guess Reinhardt didn't count, but it's 5. So, but if they keep it to 3 and 4, I guess it's not as bad. I don't know what the actual like numbers are in terms of like LL points that come out in a year versus how many heroes come out in a year, but I do think that they should balance that either so that the cast of heroes doesn't grow to like 50.
Yeah. So for reference, they did say that right now the current number of heroes is a bit too much, and they want to make sure that more heroes rotate out eventually. I think with the original LL point spread and the original distribution per season, is something planned to be like 8,000 LL points distributed this year. Since the revision, I think it's gone down to 7,000. But I think compared to last year's like 5,000, it's a step up.
And what
In
after
terms of LL points.
Rosetta, there will have been 12 heroes that came out this year.
Yeah, 12 heroes, I think.
Yeah.
So when you say you want less heroes, would you prefer it for them to release less heroes, or for them to increase LL pace?
Release less heroes, because I mean I think the LL pace is fine. Like I don't like Zen is an outlier, right? Because of how many points he gained so quickly. Like I remember when KO came out, everyone thought he was gonna LL within the year, and maybe that'll be true again with this ban list, but I think the pace is mostly fine. Like it's not too much different. But I think just the fact that like when certain heroes come out in a set, like heavy hitters, and there's Betsy and Olympia, and there's like a ton of cards in there for them, and in upcoming sets there's expansion slot card, and maybe after like 3 Majestics you finally get the deck is good. Kind of like how Riptide took like a year to be good, right? And like a specific meta for him as well. But it's like, actually, this kind of compounds. I kind of wish they brought back supplemental sets too.
I mean, that's what
Yeah.
Guardian Master Set is, right?
Alan's taking all my talking points.
It's not even the
Ruh-roh.
Mastery Pack Guardian is specifically for Guardian, which I will love. But I think what was nice about supplemental sets is that it was a new injection into the meta that didn't up the hero count, which is I feel like one of the things that is I find it's not even a bad thing that there's more heroes. It's just that like there's just so much more cards that like I don't care to see.
Well, what
Like,
I would say on that.
wait,
Oh.
take heroes out of the Majestics. That's number one. Sorry. Reverse everything I said. Take hero cards out of the Majestic slot. Like what? I can't fathom why that is a good decision.
I was gonna say to the end about heroes is that I think like if you compare, so this hero there will be 12 heroes, right? Thinking back to 2022, there were 5, right? There was Phi, Icelander, Dromai, and then Starvo and Arachne. And then last year I think there was something like there was 3 in Bright Lights, 2 in
Outsiders.
Dusk Till Dawn, and then
Yeah,
2 in Outsiders. So there were 7. So it's like 5, 7, and then 12. Like we've exploded out, and you can tell with some of the like especially heavy hitters, like some of those heroes did not get the TLC they needed, and it feels bad that you can tell how far behind decks like Olympia are, and then if we're gonna keep getting like a devoted expansion slot card to help that hero catch up, like one card every set for years, I feel like it would be a lot better to just, like Alan said, bring back expansion sets because everybody, I think, for the most part, enjoyed them. I mean, obviously, Everfest introducing Starvo was a bit of an outlier, but like you can do a lot in those sets.
So Everfest, people were pretty down on it early on. It was because the power was skewed towards Runeblade, Illusionist, and Guardian, right?
Yeah.
And then like the rest of the heroes got basically nothing, like a couple interesting cards, but like not enough to like bump them up. And then after that was Dynasty, which gave basically nothing to anybody.
I mean, it's like the 2 extremes, right? Where it's like,
Yeah, and then that was DTD, right? Which is we have 2 useless heroes, and we're also supporting at the time 2 worst heroes in the game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, that's what like Everfist did for Viserai, right? Like a lot of, I mean, it was just like straight injection into Viserai, who was struggling prior to that.
He wasn't struggling, though. He was like he was the third best Runeblade, but like Runeblade was also really good at that time, right?
I mean, okay, sure, but I think that there's like a middle ground between one card per class every set that then either has to be so crazy that it's worth it, or it ends up being like really obscure, which is what happens kind of split. Like all of those four blue Evo cards from the last set,
Mhm.
like those did not solve the problems that we needed to for Tekla, and they're just like, oh, maybe your cold foil is one of those Evo speed boot or whatever.
Yep.
And it's like, is this really what we want to be doing? Because it seems strange to me. I don't think it's like a huge miss, but I agree with Alan that it feels a little off.
All right. Oliver or Miles, you guys can take it from here if you want to change one thing about the game right now.
Yeah, I just want to build on top of what Alan was saying. Is like the thing about the expansion slot is they're using it as a band-aid to fix all their shit classes. And I would like that to not be the case.
Because it's all majestic focused like power cards, right?
Yeah, is that, but also because like you don't need every hero to be adult. Like if it's like half baked, like what you said, like Olympia or something was like added like very late into heavy hitters.
Yep.
Like you don't really need to make them an adult if your card pool isn't that big, or like it doesn't support your hero ability that well. So I feel like they don't need to make everything adult. You don't want to have your expansion slot to band-aid everything like Supercell did for Max, or what the AB equipment is doing for Teklevasin. So
they don't really help, but yeah.
I guess there is a small counterpoint. Like if Olympia and Betsy were young only, then pulling a like bet big would feel really bad, right? It would be like pulling Spring Tidings or Blood on Her Hands back then. But then there's those people, who spec on cards, and Betsy Star of the Show is gonna come out.
Well, to be fair, Alan, like bet big is still like a 50-cent or $1 card, right? Because Betsy's not good.
Like Blood on Her Hands was the one time it happened, right? I'm just saying, like people will do it, so it's fine.
People play Blitz all the time too, so there's also Shiana spec. Shiana's really fun.
Whoa, you hate Blitz. Okay, so anyway,
we played like the CC plus format, so I can play Shiana as adult, and it's quite fun.
Okay, so anyway, what I wanted to say counter to that is that during Outsiders era, one of the chief complaints was that we only got 2 CC heroes, and they should just make they should make more heroes CC legal.
Yeah, suck it
even
up.
Now, even now we're hearing that.
I think anything. It's different groups complaining about different things.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, the only thing we can complain about is how we've seen it work out. Which I think if they would have made like basically just bumped Zen up to Outsiders and it would have been adult Benji, that would have been awful.
Yep.
So I think they made the right call there. I think it's only, you can only find out in retrospect. Like if we come back to like MSC this time next year, like I'm sure we'll have even different opinions then. But
yeah, I mean, like same thing with public perception of Everfest, right? Before it was like, oh, Everfest sucks because
I loved Everfest from start to now
because of the carnival slot and all these useless junky cold foils.
Bingo.
Yeah. But now he's like, wow, Everfest is pretty good. And Dynasty is slowly creeping up there in public opinion too. Dynasty and Dustodon. They're like,
no, I still hate Dynasty, man. They did Guardians so dirty in that set.
They did them so good in
Shield
Everfest,
Bash.
that's why.
Dude, Shield Bash is so fun. We wouldn't have like Boombox without it. Holy shit.
Yeah. Okay, what I would like to see changed is, I think just, I don't know what it is. It feels like there are such big swings with Fab where they're like, we're trending in a direction, and then like it's kind of vocally people don't like that direction, and it's like we have to wait to do a big course correction like this. Like this article, like they were originally planning to wait until like after Rosetta came out, which I think would have been awful if they waited that long. I think they knew they were going to make this adjustment. And I mean, I know we saw like the one rare tweet from Brian Gottlieb that was like, "We hear you. We're not going to let Zen overshadow." Just let it rip right away. I think just making smaller edits more consistently. If you're gonna have these giant big swings in power, like we go from bright lights to MST in like 9 months, you need to like have gradients as we go up instead of these gigantic swings in power and like philosophy.
Oh, to be fair, heavy hitters was the bridge, right? Where it's like just right in power level almost. Maybe it's slightly
Yeah.
bait.
But I mean, I think that like announcing like, hey, we're doing this. I mean, I know they did to an extent, but I know early on I chatted with Oliver about like looking at the heroes of MST because I was like trying to find a new like a new location. And I was like, maybe this is finally the time I play Illusionist. Probably gonna do new because I have experience with playing Azuri. And I was like, I'm not going back to my 5 days. Like, I feel like I've evolved as a person. And I then said, I was like, if Zen is the best deck and it's like the best choice, I feel like it's going to be a very bad omen for Fab. And here we are. So I think it's something like that where, like, LSS has made this mistake before with Phi, and it's concerning to me that it happened again, essentially, with the same class, like 2 years later. And it almost feels like they were more ready for Phi because they like pre-banned Stubbies and like were ready on the jump to ban it in CC. And they're just like, I guess Zen's a little too strong, guys, and as it dominates like every format possible, LLs and Blitz within 2 weeks. Like Oliver said, this is like good, a good message, but like I really want to see the delivery. That's my biggest concern going forward. Is just like, oof.
I think maybe the one thing that was different about Phi and Zen was that Zen came right before major tournaments, whereas Phi came right before RTN season. And I remember playing through that RTN season, and I felt like Phi was really good, but it hadn't really become like the talk of the town until it won the calling in Utrecht, I want to say.
Yep.
And then it was after that when they banned Stub. No, it wasn't. It was
Stubbies.
Stubbies. Yeah, Stubbies.
Yeah, well, they also let it like ride through RTN season because they didn't want to make. Well, back then we didn't do any checks like weekly for LL.
It went through like three weeks, right? They got banned. Like,
but even during that RTN season, I don't think Phi gained that many points compared to like other heroes. Like he wasn't like dominating or anything.
Yeah. But the thing was, everybody was talking about how awful it was to play against it at Armory, but at the same time, it didn't have the results that like Zen did in high tier competitive. Because I think it's a thing where again, it was like one of those heroes where it's very punishing if you're new because they will just kind of run you over if you didn't interrupt him. But at high levels, like a lot of the decks available then, like Icelander and Oldhim, like stopped him, and Bravo, like on it, like I remember the first time I played Phi, I paired into Alan round 1 and he stomped me as Bravo, and I was like, wow, that feels bad. And you can't do that to Zen, like, which is they made him even stronger.
People have been saying that Zen had the Dromai situation where he like got into top 8 and then kind of just like shat itself and then like didn't convert into top 1 a lot compared to like how strong of a deck he was.
Maybe that is a better comparison with Lexi. I feel like that was kind of what happened with Lexi.
One
calling, like, didn't win the Pro Tour.
Yeah, the other thing is like this period right now they're in isn't exactly like competitive season. So
yeah, it's just like large tournaments, right?
Yeah, it's just like large tournaments, and like it's not even like big large tournaments. It's just like, oh yeah, there's a calling here, or yeah, here's a battle hardened here.
I mean, we had PT, right? I mean, he lost the PT.
Yeah, but it was the PT was like the test of whether or not the ban worked, right? And like,
and it turns out when you make a deck explicitly to kill that hero, and then you get up there, then you'll do it. So,
yeah, but like people, I assume what they thought is this is being charitable is that it's going to be an off season, and therefore you don't need to worry about any big seasons being ruined immediately by Zen. So might as well stick to this regular schedule cadence.
Yeah,
and I think they didn't expect the dissatisfaction to grow so loud because it was Twitter is basically unusable at this point. So
yeah, honestly. So I don't know. I guess my takeaway is just I think
you need to be more reactive.
Or yeah, like smaller changes over time, like better communication, just like I don't know. I feel like this is probably a flashpoint, and it'll be like that from now on. I like the swings will grow less large as they hone in on exactly like what they want Fab to be. And I mean, to be fair, it's again only been 5 years, and like this is a tremendous game with like a lot of nuance that I'm sure it's hard to design for. So, like, I want to be hopeful, but I'm wary.
Wait and see.
That's all. Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair.
And all right. So my thing going off of Miles is you mentioned good communication. No. Alan took my part, so I'm going to say something else. I would love to see them be more transparent with their testing process, because I mean, like the Brian Gottlieb article with like the bonds ban was quite insightful about how they totally fucking missed bonds in Zen. But yeah, I would love to see more transparency with how they test, because I feel like, man, I've been saying this like privately, but I'm just gonna put it out publicly. I've lost faith in LSS devs since Codex, and I want to see them be more open about their testing process to see if they're actually up to snuff.
You don't think they're good players?
I
Hey,
think,
bring back the Blitz team event where you play the devs,
yeah. Yeah,
but make it CC.
I think they're fine players. I mean, like most of them have like really good credentials and stuff, but I feel
Here's
like
a
sometimes they just
here's
miss
a question
things.
for you. Do you think being a good player is a prerequisite to being a good designer?
No.
I
don't
don't
think
think
so.
so. I don't think so.
Because clearly being a designer does not mean you're a good player. Or sorry, Brody proves that you're not necessarily a good designer if you're a good player, right?
Hey.
He's having fun, right?
That's crazy. That's funny. Though.
I mean, I think to be fair, I think again, they're like it's a very small company, very small team, and as soon as it's gonna hit out to everybody, like we're gonna find the most busted stuff by playing thousands of games on Talishar like people are apparently. So it's hard. But yeah, like Oliver, if you said like they shared out their policies and they showed a little something, people could be like, "Hey, you missed this thing, you missed that thing." And to be fair, I'm sure there's crazy stuff that they've had in testing that didn't see the light of day. So like, who's to say they aren't protecting us from even worse horrors, right?
Yeah,
I mean that.
their Zen ban article was like, this is Zen post tuning, right? They're
Yeah.
like, we hit on like nerfing Zen.
Because I think like one thing is they've been very clear after people's bad reactions to Ice and bad reactions to Illusionist about trying to rein in those archetypes, which I guess Enigma is proof that they've done that to some extent. And like they were very scared of giving like Max the auto win button with Supercell in the set, and that's why they released it later when it was clear he didn't land right. And I think that's why like Teklevasan is maybe one cost too much on some things or like too slow because they don't want those kinds of like tank up archetypes to be the dominant one, which they even say in this article where they like want games to end by health to 0 rather than like run out of cards. Um, so and they've achieved that. So it might have not have been the thing we were all focused on, but they did set that goal and have seemed to achieve it in the time since. So I do have faith of some kind that they can achieve this change because they've made other big changes and they've kind of worked quietly in the same amount of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, a year ago, people were complaining about Oldham, right? So that's probably
Yeah.
a big part of their
Yeah, exactly. So
design
I'm hoping a
process
year
as
from
well.
now, these complaints about Zen make it so that we don't see it again. But
Yeah. I think also like Kieran, let's on the dev talks, Kieran mentioned like, oh, Hybrid Prism is actually like a really good deck. I would love to see what they brewed up, because I did my part. I won with a Hybrid Prism on a Battle Hardened. I want to see what they cooked up. See like, oh, how far away was I from the dev deck list? I think that'd be fun and interesting.
Yeah.
you should
To
just
be fair,
ask them
though-
to fly you out and go explore the offices and have a fun time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To be fair though, most likely what their internal testing does contain some cards that never made it print. So who knows?
that's true.
Yeah, I think the main issue for me is that they've course corrected multiple times, so that it's very difficult to tell when something was built based on what principles. So actually, I have the opposite request, which is they should be less reactive, because a lot of the
Oh,
twists and turns the meta has taken have been a result of them trying to course correct too hard, right? It was crew into Mon, where okay, well, we don't want defensive decks to be super powerful, so let's make bursty decks. It was Mon into Uprising / Dynasty, where Ice started to be king, and it's like, okay, well, bursty decks are too strong. Let's add more disruption to the game and make more disruption more prevalent, so that these 5-card hand decks aren't so great. And then Ice became too good, and they're like, okay, well, let's bring back value of Flesh and Blood, and let's do mid-rangey stuff. And now, having that up, people were complaining about it being too numbers focused. So they're like, okay, well, obviously they didn't make MST to be so explosive, but like they're like, okay, well, we'll make these natural shifts in the metagame where certain types of strategies are dominant, and just so happens to line up with what people are complaining about du jour. And as a result, you get these polarized metas and a game that's very difficult to manage because, well, you developed DTD because people were saying I'm concerned about power creep and we don't want these super powerful decks in the metagame. Let's power everything down. And when people are like, "Well, this is too much power down. We're not able to sell bright lights or DTD." They're like, okay, sweet. Well, we'll bump up the power level again with heavy and MST. So I think their waves are too wavy. They need to have less waves.
I guess the thing I was looking at, which I guess is not feasible because of how timelines for games work, was
Yeah.
like do smaller changes even faster. But I don't think there is an even. Well, I mean, maybe with these armory decks they can tackle that because apparently we're going every other month for releases now, so you can do it in that way. But
Yeah, their armory decks have a less of a development time cycle, so I think they can be more reactive for that. But it's more about that. That's more about band-aid fixes, I think, more so than expansion slot cards, which are also on a similar timescale, I think.
well, I mean, I guess like so far the decks that we've had, they aren't even like banned because like things like Supercell is like, okay, you're not doing well. Here's like a direct steroid injection of like your game plan is easier. Whereas like I think, I mean, with the exception of like Savage Dash, which didn't end up being as bad as we all thought, I guess. But like the Azalea cards and the Bolton cards are like, here is more directions to take the deck in the way it's already going,
Yeah,
as like a slight bolster across a couple of cards, right? Which is basically just like the same amount of cards in Majestic you would get if you like package them in an expansion set, right? Where you get like 3 or 4 Majestics. Like that's essentially what these boxes are doing for like individual heroes.
Yeah.
And I think it's working out. Like I don't think it's made any meta monsters, and I don't, it's doing enough to make the people that play those heroes like happier. So
I don't
I
know.
think that's a good strat.
Some Bolton fans are still sad.
Well,
Oh
I mean,
wow,
Bolton
Bolton
is
really didn't get
tremendously
another
good.
on-rate
Yeah.
charge card, eh?
Well, yeah,
Bolton's good. I'm glad Plexus got
Says the
killed,
one
though.
deck you didn't go net even
Yeah,
in.
yeah. I think those cards are individually good. The Bolton deck just was not well positioned in the meta I brought it to, which was Zen and Kano.
yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, I think the deck overall was fun because I beat KO twice in testing with Oliver.
Yeah,
pretty good.
Silence.
It's fine. He took the Bolton deck and beat me on KO, and then and before that I took the Bolton deck and beat him on KO. So it's not a skill issue.
perfectly balanced as all things should be.
Yeah, perfectly balanced. Yeah, I think the thing for me is that I want more communication in general. And they've gotten less and less communicative over the years. And I do think that the how MST played out is a big factor in making the argument that they should be less communicative and more secretive with their stuff. I think the biggest tragedy of MST from their or one of the big tragedies of MST from their perspective is that the meta was solved on release because the cards were available 2 to 3 weeks beforehand. And like online centers, people were grinding out games back then. So
yeah.
So
I mean, they've avoided that this set, right? Like we don't know anything about how to make these heroes.
That's why I think they did it. Not because they want to preserve excitement for the metagame, but I think that more than anything, they want to make sure that the natural hype cycle of their competitive play circuit plays into the release cycle.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I definitely felt that with MST. Like I was in a particularly busy time in life with like work, and then I come and everybody's like 7 layers deep on the heroes, and the meta game has evolved, and like the set's not even out yet, and it felt very alienating, even as somebody who's like an enfranchised player. So I think that if that's what they're doing with Rosetta, like that's a good choice.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Any other last thoughts about the ban list? Fly by takes.
Good stuff. Keep it up.
Alan?
Errata Tome of Torments, so that it's playable.
Oliver?
I wish it would ban some other cards as well. Philosophy.
Oh
Buzz.
yes, ban Visit Goldmane Estate.
Yeah, Goldman Estate, Scavenging Leathers, all the other crazy things.
Ban Tunic of Fiendel. That's my nuclear take. Spring Tunic.
Oh, Spring Tunic. Bring Tao on here, man.
Ooh, that's a big take. I can see them banning action point generators in the future. Maybe they didn't want to do like draw spells and action point generators in the same thing or something. I don't know.
Not my Snapdragons each in.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that's about it. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.